Hey, it's David. Let's get this saddle build done. Right. I've done a lot of work in looking at seat post suspension systems that could work. The 1940s Harley WA and its variants, the military bikes, they used it. And in the 50s, the glides on which the Dragstar is very much styled, certainly the Dragstar Classic is very much styled, used that bicycle seat post. I'm pretty sure I can fabricate one, and I think I can fabricate one out of the springs from an old fork leg, or actually using the actual fork leg itself. I think if I chop the spring, I chop the fork leg down, I can get something that's got enough suspension movement in it to do what I want. But whilst I was looking around, what I noticed and what I came to realise is there is a particular design of bicycle saddles with seat post springs that is more unique to America than it is to the UK. We generally went with the same sort of system that I was trying to mount there, and which I did use in America too, which was basically the saddle with two springs mounted there, and you sort of bounce up and down on the springs. But so I did some looking around, and I bought this, which is as far as I can see a French bicycle saddle. Don't panic too much just yet. Don't know if this is going to work, but it's got this type of spring arrangement here where it actually pushes through and extends this bottom spring on a downward push. So I'm going to have a look and see whether or not I can use this to build what I want, because it has a suspension system, it has a mounting for a seat post, perhaps not quite as adjustable as I would have wanted, because modern saddles you can move them back and forward and all sorts of things, but it might just work, and we won't know until we try. So, cover removed. We have a hinge end on here and springs on here. So the basic principle is pretty much there where we were looking before. So if we attach something like that, position to be decided, with the hinge section mounted to the front, using the mounting bolts there, bit of cutting and welding, and the rear springs attached to the mounts there, and that's starting to look a possibility. I've chopped the saddle down to the only part of it that I was really interested in, which is the spring suspension system at the back. Now, to be honest, it's a little bit narrow for my tastes, but whilst I could sort of widen it here, I'm not going to. This is seems to be made of a spring steel, and it's just wrapped around these springs. It's the way it holds them in. So I'm thinking I'm going to leave well alone for now, at least on this. And so with this build, I can always come back, I can always modify things if it turns out I don't like them. It's the great point of a modular build, as I keep saying. And you know, if you want to make your bike, so it's different from everybody else's, then you need to play with stuff. You try something, it works, it doesn't work, you change it. So the way this works is that this bottom bar here works off a pivot. The top part here is fixed to the saddle, and the front of this pivot is fixed to the saddle. So the saddle sits on here and they pivot, and as you go down the saddle pivots, or whichever way you want to look at it. So the springs compress and the saddle moves. So I need to mount this to the front of the saddle, and I need to mount this to the back of the saddle. Now to do that, I've made up a couple of brackets. I've done this off camera simply because it's just bending bits of metal, drilling holes in it, and welding. And this is the front part. So with the saddle, previously I had the swivel part mounted here with the swivel here. Now I'm going backwards the opposite direction. So I've made up a swivel mount. I'm just using strap steel, which you can pick up from ironmongers and the like, or Wicks, I think in the UK. I bought this. It's not necessarily the cheapest place to buy it, but it's convenient. So so that's going to go on there. I need to adjust all this to fit finally. So that's going to be like that, and then what will happen is that I need to extend these cut-off bars here so that they'll go forward and hinge on that pivot, and these will mount here. Now I've had to do quite a lot of fiddling to judge the height of this, because this is going to be doing this, and what I don't want to be doing is having this bottoming out on if you go over a bump, because that's not going to be a particularly pleasant ride, because it will squish and then you'll get a jar. So I've actually left quite a lot more height than I expected to. Again, completely adjustable should I decide to in the future. Probably won't, but I could. So to mount this on, I've made another bracket, which is this one. Again, all of these need finishing and fettling and such. Right, so that's the mount for that. So with this, get it the right way around. So that mounts at the back. This hooks over that. Let's just try and give a bit more rigidity to the whole system. And then that gives us a spring system like this. So I need to finish off extending these bars here and put a swivel in here so that that can done, and then the saddle part of this is done. What I need to do now is to finish off this and to build the mounting system on the bike. So bit of a change of plan, but this is where we're going now. It's a little bit difficult to mock up, and that's certainly sitting higher than it will be, but that's roughly the look I'm going for. If you can imagine that sitting down a couple of inches, then because I'm still aiming for the nose here to be about in line with this paint line, trim line here, which is more or less where the stock seat sits. So the nose will drop down. The back is not too far out of its final position. That's probably more or less where it will be, but the front needs to drop down because this is supposed to be flat. And the nature of these springs means that the back actually will kick up a bit more than looks perhaps right when the bike is sitting, but when you sit on the saddle, those springs will compress a bit and the back will drop down. So that's where we are as of today. The last couple of videos I've been struggling a bit with the concept it took me a while to build the front mount. That was mostly what you might call a mechanical thing for me, because I'm not an expert welder, I'm not a fabricator, I'm not one of these guys who is a mechanical genius. I'm just a pretty average guy when it comes to this stuff, and it takes me a long time to think this stuff through. And I really have to do it with my hands, and because my skill levels are not fantastic at fabrication, I cock stuff up and then I have to do it again, and it just doesn't work out the way I thought I had it in my head, because I do have ideas in my head. When you try it and it doesn't quite go the way you think, but you learn, and that's the part that I enjoy, and that's, to be honest, one of the major reasons why I do this stuff. It is because I enjoy the learning process, and as I say, sometimes I stand back and I think, whoa. But then you step back and you move on. So I've got the front end of this to do, but I think what was really slowing me down in the previous videos was because I was trying to replicate what I'd seen on other bobbers. I was trying to replicate the seats that I'd seen other bobber companies make for kits and the like, and I knew it wasn't what I wanted, and I've made several references in the previous videos to what I did actually want, but because it was going to be difficult to do, I couldn't really see a way of doing it, and it's taken me a little while to actually play and decide that no, I really don't like the way that I was heading, and to head somewhere slightly different, something I've not really seen done before. Now, it would be very easy to use things like little suspension units from mountain bikes, this sort of stuff. I see them all over the place on bobbers and custom bikes and stuff, and they're a great solution, but not right for this. There are a couple of alternative solutions I could use, and I've mapped them out in my head, and I'm fairly sure I know what I would do with them, but not for this build, hopefully. I'm quite sure that I can get this one done in the way I want it, and we'll see what happens. So thanks very much for watching, and I will catch you guys again soon.